New York Times versus United States was a very impactful court decision that happened in 1971. This court case addressed some of the key things that we as Americans think about. How much power do we want our government to have over what we have access to? Our media. How much information is too much information? All of these things, even though it was occurring back then, are still things that we ask ourselves today. Now some may ask, what led to this court decision? Well, during the 1960s through the early 1970s, the United States was involved in the Vietnam War. Now, our intervention and involvement in the war caused a lot of hostility in our mainland America. Many protests against our intervention because many Americans were tired of the United States' constant intervention with foreign affairs. Daniel Ellsberg, military contractor, felt similar. He found disclosed government documents that we now know as the Pentagon Papers. These Pentagon Papers held details of what America was really doing when it comes to their involvement in the Vietnam War. First, it disclosed that Lyndon B. Johnson, the former president, lied to Congress and Americans about the extent to which the United States military was involved in the war in Southeast Asia. Additionally, it also disclosed the fact that our country, under Harry S. Truman, helped the French fight a colonial war against a communist regime called the Viet Minh, thus increasing our intervention within the Vietnam War. With these documents released, it would create an uproar throughout the country. Daniel Ellsberg, finding these documents, sent these documents to his friend Anthony Russo Jr., who then was the one to unleash these documents to one of the highest media outlets at the time, the New York Times. When the New York Times got a hold of the story, they knew that this was gold and this was something that people needed to know. On top of that, additionally, the Washington Post also got a hold of these documents too. However, due to the fact that the Nixon administration at this time was the one of power, the Attorney General under Nixon's control said that there was no way that they could disclose these documents because they are disclosed. And they are private government documents, and they were going to prevent the articles from being published. Now, what we need to think about is Nixon's administration going against our First Amendment right of freedom of speech by preventing the publication of these documents? Is the government allowed to have power over what gets published and what doesn't? And if so, how much will that power go? Throughout our country, we've seen from decades, centuries on, the importance it is for a nation to not have severe government control. We come from first our establishment as a colony of Great Britain, bring under their control, fighting for our independence. And even as the years and centuries have gone by from there, we have made sure we put things in through laws and through the Constitution to ensure that the individual rights are the thing that is most important to America and the thing that will allow us to be governed the way that we should. And even going into the 1950s, when we had the Second Red Scare, and the fear of rising communism wasn't just the fear of communism, but it was the fear of this apocalyptic, large amount of government control over citizens, leaving them in disarray. And due to this is why this case is so important, because it is honing in on the importance of one's individual's rights and the rights that are given to us by birth from the Constitution. So as these things are occurring, this had led to the New York Times saying, we need to bring this case to court, we need to do something about this. Representing New York Times was Alexander Bitchel. Alexander Bitchel, he argued that the First Amendment right wasn't just for the individual, but it was for the press to be able to freely talk and post and print out on newspapers what is going on without having the government involved in trying to prevent it. He also said that prior restraint shouldn't be allowed and goes against the First Amendment, and it is not right that they are trying to prevent two newspaper companies at the time, New York Times and the Washington Post, from publishing, and that it is going against the amendment. However, on the other side, the contrast side, we have the U.S. Solicitor General, Irwin Ellsworth. He argued that this was not going against the First Amendment. He stated that this was something that needed to be done. In his words, he believed that if these documents got out, it'd be a harm to the government. Furthermore, if these documents got out on the world stage, it would affect the United States' relationship with a lot of foreign powers, and that of negative effect it would have a relationship with foreign powers could possibly negatively affect the lives of individuals and what they can and cannot get. He even said that prior restraint is something that, even though it shouldn't occur all the time, should occur if it is going to affect national security. He told the court that if given 45 days, under the Nixon administration, they would create a risk task force, and under that task force, they would make sure they would review the papers and release them publicly after it being overlooked, to ensure that the public is still being able to see the papers, but it is not overstepping what the public can and cannot know that the government does. Now, after deliberation and after thinking, the court finally came back. The majority ruled that no, the Nixon administration / the government could not stop the New York Times or the Washington Post from posting these files. It was saying that prior restraint is just not something that they would condone. The three main opinions of this ruling on the majority consisted of Black, Douglas, and Brennan. Black and Douglas agreed that the reason why they said no is that if they allowed this to occur, it would be going against what our founding fathers wanted and aspire for the First Amendment. They believe that allowing this is going to deplete the power in which our country was supposed to have within the First Amendment, in that freedom of speech. Now, Justice Brennan had a concurrent opinion to this topic. He stated that even though he doesn't really believe in prior restraint, he understands the idea that it being used to protect national security. However, he said that if prior restraint were to occur, there has to be severe consequences for allowing this to occur. And he said that if severe consequences are not going to occur from it, then it should not be allowed. However, even though the majority ruled, the dissenting had a different idea. Representing the dissenting opinions is Justices Marshall, Harlan, and Berger. They believed that the court was just going too fast in deciding the effects of this court case and what they wanted to occur. They believe that national security is a priority, and if prior restraint has to occur to ensure that our national security is safe, then it had to occur. And that a case like this should be a priority of the executive board and shouldn't be ruled in a court case like this. However, with the majority being in favor of the New York Times, this case represented so much more than just any court case. It was a court case that represented the importance of freedom of speech, and it even highlighted the fact of the importance of one's freedom of speech, not as just an individual, but as the freedom of press. However, the thing about this court case is that because the majority didn't really define exactly their idea of private restraint, because even people on the majority still felt as if they were possibly for private restraint under different circumstances, there are still minor loopholes with the private restraint that could still be addressed to this day. However, the impact of this court case will forever stand for its positive impact it has for reinforcing the power of one's First Amendment. And that is United States versus New York Times.